All right, everyone, welcome back. I'm really excited to be joined by Ashley Spencer today. She wrote a book, Disney High, The Untold Story of the Rise and Fall of Disney Channel's Tween Empire. Which, first, right off the bat, Ashley, I love titles with subtitles because I'm an academic writer, so I always use subtitles. So when I saw that title, I instantly that spoke to me. Um, Ashley is here to talk about the Disney Channel. As many of you know who have listened to the show before, watched any of the videos we've done in class, um, a lot of semesters people will ask me, or I will ask students what will be interesting to hear about in the future. And time and again, the Disney Channel comes up. And I didn't feel like I was at the point where I could really talk about the Disney Channel, and we'll get into that here in just a little bit. But then Ashley put out this book, and it is an amazing book. I listened to the Audible version, and it's full of so many interesting stories and interesting tidbits. And so I thought this is the perfect time to have somebody on and talk about what the Disney Channel is, what it means, and then get into her book as well. So, without me talking too much more, Ashley, thank you for joining us. Welcome to Being a Fan of Disney, the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. So to start off, let's start off with your background. Um, Tell us what got you into your interest in Disney, what brought you, and then bring us to today where you have written this book about the Disney Channel in the early 2000s.
Sure. So I grew up in Orlando, Florida. So Disney as a company was kind of always just percolating in the background around me. I had like family friends when I was growing up that one of them, her after school job was she was Minnie Mouse in the costume at Disney World. And so I kind of just always was aware of Disney as a business. Also a place that I love to go. A lot of our field trips would be to the parks. They would have them under the guise of educational scavenger hunts. And so we'd go and have to like find facts. I don't know. They found a way to make it that the parents were like, okay, sure, we'll pay for them to go to Disney for the day and call it school. Um, so Disney was always prevalent and present in my life. And then I also started doing journalism, I guess, in high school on the high school newspaper. And I also just loved pop culture. I'm a huge fan of pop culture and was always a consumer of movies and music and TV. And so those interests kind of combined to my first internships and things were at entertainment news outlets. My first big internship was in New York at a magazine called Cosmo Girl, which is probably before the students' time. It went extinct in 2008, I believe. But that was my first like gateway into entertainment journalism. And then when I graduated college, I my first job was at J14 magazine, which was if you know, it's targeted fully at the tween set and it's pull out posters, and it was very much during the era. This was in the early 2010s, so we were covering people like Miley Cyrus and Selena Gomez and Demi Lovato and that Disney Channel era. And but I had also grown up with Disney Channel itself. Central Florida was one of the last markets to switch from premium to basic cable. So I was lured in. They used to do sneak a peek weekends where they would drop it for free and make you like enamored with the content and then take it away. So you'd have to beg your parents to pay for it. And I did. And so I really loved that Y2K era of the famous Jet Jackson and So Weird and Lizzie McGuire, even Stevens. That was my era of Disney Channel. So then about 4 years ago in 2020, kind of during peak COVID times, I started thinking about what I might like to embark on with a book. As a journalist, I mean, I am a freelance journalist, so I write mostly for the New York Times and Washington Post, LA Times. I've written for Vanity Fair, Vice, a bunch of different places. But when I write for them, I often, always have to cut my articles down to about under 3,000 words, sometimes under 1,500 words. And so when you're diving into something like a TV production or a movie, the making of a film, any of that, you have so many voices that you're trying to include and so many stories. And so it can be frustrating to have all this information and know that you're not going to be able to use it. So I really like the idea of doing a book that could expand on a world that I would never be able to in an article. And I landed on Disney Channel, one, because I couldn't believe no one had done this before. To me, it's such an obvious story to tell. It's such a huge story. In the 2000s, Disney Channel became a massive global empire, a billion-dollar earner for the Walt Disney Company. And so I saw this gaping hole of history that we needed to tackle. And then I also just thought, as someone who did grow up with it, as someone who worked as a journalist, kind of covering some of those things, I had the background to be able to tackle this and the interest to not get bored doing it over several years. So that's what led me to this book. And yeah, it's been about a 4-year journey from when I started to it getting published in September.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you for that. One one thing I want to ask first, you mentioned going to the parks on scavenger hunts. Um, did you do like the Epcot World Showcase scavenger hunts and everything?
Yes, yeah, it was usually to Epcot or Animal Kingdom were the ones that could get
Okay.
away with more than Hollywood Studios or Magic Kingdom. I don't remember if it was like it was our teachers. They would make custom sheets and
Okay.
things, and it would be like they've changed the rides a lot too. At the time, they had something called Body Wars, which was a
hmm
simulator, and it
hmm
was like you go inside the human body, and then so there'd be a question like, "What does the colon do?" or something
Yeah.
you would learn from that ride. So you'd ride the ride, and then you'd learn the fact, and I mean it's pretty smart, but yeah.
Because another thing that's really, really interesting to me is how the Walt Disney Company as a whole has kind of marketed itself, promoted itself as this edutainment company as well. And so they would, when Epcot Center first opened, I'm a huge fan of Figment. I mean, they made
Yes.
Figment like cartoons and stuff to teach mathematics and vocabulary and things. And then more recently, this would, I guess, 2005 to 2010-ish, maybe. I know when they were when the Kingdom Keepers books were in their first series, they're doing a follow, he's doing a follow-up series now, but the company actually had him develop uh, different scavenger hunts for kids that they could walk through the
Oh,
parks and they could kind of
okay.
they could piece these things together.
Oh,
So
that's
it's really, really interesting to me that the way that the company has always kind of, people think about the company as edutainment in many ways. And a lot of the reason is because that's what the company has kind of promoted themselves as. Um, and what I think is really, really interesting from there to take the leap from there to the book is the way that the company the way that the company always operated was to work with newer talent, to try to find newer talent for their movies and for the television shows that they could, under the old rules of Hollywood, could sign people to multiple picture deals. Then when blockbusters started to become a thing and the companies were spending more and more on their movie budgets, the success of franchises like Pirates of the Caribbean, and then they purchased Marvel and these huge budget movies. One thing that I got from your book was the it was almost as though they adapted their previous model of finding new talent to their Disney Channel movie, and they applied that to the Disney Channel. Um, tell us tell us kind of what the approach they would take to find talent for these new shows, and then what became the Disney Channel original movies.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's yes and no to them kind of going back to that studio system. And they did it that way with something like the all new Mickey Mouse Club in the 90s, which is where you get Britney Spears, Justin Timberlake, Ryan Gosling, Christina Aguilera, Kerry Russell, all coming out of that. And when they signed those kids, they really, while they were shooting the Mickey Mouse Club, which shot on a backlot here at Disney. What's now Disney's Hollywood Studios was then Disney MGM Studios. And so while they're shooting the show, in their breaks, they're also getting singing lessons, acting lessons, dancing lessons. Like they're running it. I mean, someone is quoted in the book as saying it was like Juilliard. Like they've invested in this talent, and so they're wanting to maximize what they'll be able to do potentially later. At the same time, they didn't really have that Disney machine. Sorry, my cat is he's getting
Oh
into
no,
trouble. I've locked him out.
no.
They didn't have that all of the levers of the Disney machine that we know now in place and agreeable to cross promote those teenagers. So what you see happening is that the All New Mickey Mouse Club ends in the mid 90s. Justin Timberlake, JC Chasez joined the boy band NSYNC. Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera become mega famous solo stars, but none of that is happening on a Disney record label. So they let those kids free. They cut them loose. They didn't have the mechanisms to keep them under the Disney banner, even though there were Disney record labels at the time. They had experimented with a group made up of other Mouseketeers called the Party, and they had tried to make them famous, and it just didn't work. They had signed them to a Disney record label, but no one took them seriously. So they like MTV is not playing their videos; they're not getting mainstream radio play. And when that was happening, there was no Radio Disney yet. There was Disney Channel was not uh, widespread. It was only a premium offering, so you have to pay to subscribe to it. And so the reach just wasn't there to create stars in the way that we later see in the 2000s. And then, so they start experimenting. I mean, really, with Lizzie McGuire and Hilary Duff is what changes everything. But even that, it's not a given. They don't sign Hilary to this mega contract that's guaranteeing her a record deal and a theatrical film. There's none of that. She's literally signed to do Lizzie McGuire, the show. And then you have these individuals uh, at the record labels, on the TV side, certain people that are seeing the value in, okay, we've got a self-made star here within the Disney Channel. We've got a record label. There's an audience there. How can we make this happen? And Hillary very much wanted to sing as well. And so you start seeing the divisions begrudgingly work together because they really didn't want to. They didn't. I mean, Disney Channel wasn't a proven star making machine. People like Britney and Justin that we think of, oh, they came from Disney Channel, but they weren't famous while they were on Disney Channel. They were famous to fans of the Mickey Mouse Club, but that's a very small group. They were not megastars. So Disney didn't have this proven track record of we guarantee money if you promote our stars. So they signed Hillary to Hollywood Records, and she puts out her album Metamorphosis, and then it becomes more viable, the teen music pipeline from TV star to teen music star. But even then, they start to include language in these TV kids contracts that basically say the Disney record labels get a first look. Like you have to give us the option to potentially sign you, but you're not guaranteed this. But you can't go to an outside label and just sign with them. We want a chance to potentially sign
Mhm.
you. So they have language like that. But what you see happen is even with something like High School Musical, those kids, they're signed for just that movie. There's no sequel option. There's nothing. Zac Efron's deal does not include any sort of franchising potential. And so every time there's a sequel, every time there's a new project, they're doing new contracts with all these kids. So it's not really locking them in, even though we think of it as, oh, these Disney's, controlling their career. It was still a lot of piecemeal re-signing every time. Where that completely changed was Demi Lovato. And Demi's contract at the network was completely different from people before her. And it basically was signing her to her show, also to, I think it was 3 Disney Channel original movies, and also included the potential if Sunny with a Chance, which was her show, if they decided to make a theatrical film out of that, she was locked in for that. So it was like scoping out, and then as well as the first look, or actually she already had her deal with Hollywood Records. That was a concurrent thing that she signed. So that's that old studio system scope coming in again.
Mhm.
But for a while they were still just um, doing a lot of, you know, let's figure it out as we go.
Yeah. Well, and then even with like you talk about signing to record labels, and in the book you talk about, and correct me if I'm wrong, you talk about the difference between um, Walt Disney, I can't remember
Walt
what it
Disney
was called,
Records and Hollywood
Walt Disney
Records.
Records and
Mhm.
Hollywood Records. That Walt Disney Records really was that's where like the soundtracks for movies would be.
Yes.
Um, and maybe like a High School Musical would be like on that, but when people were doing more individual projects, it would be on Hollywood. And you kind of get into the reason why, like Hollywood Records was not a very successful record label for a long
No.
time. I mean, I remember hearing the story of it was kind of like a trivia point, like, hey, do you know Insane Clown Posse is like on a album or Disney record? You're like, really? That's
Yeah, I mean
crazy.
Hollywood Records, they in the early 90s they had the reputation, it's quoted in the book, it was like a New York Times article from a leaked memo, that they were known as the Titanic captain by the Three Stooges. Like it was just this bumbling label, but they were trying to be very much a legit record label. They did not want to be a kiddie label that was for Walt Disney Records, which you're right, had the animated film soundtracks. It also and other live action soundtracks eventually. It had a lot of Mickey Mouse compilations. And then Hollywood Records, their biggest coup is they had bought Queen's catalog. They had signed this deal
Mm.
with Queen, and I think they finished the deal like the year before Freddie Mercury died. And then they have this catalog, but it didn't translate to legitimizing them as a label. And so, but what starts to change around Y2K is teen pop does become incredibly popular in the mainstream with boy bands, with Britney, Christina, Mandy Moore, Jessica Simpson, everyone. Bubblegum pop is really like the flavor of the moment. And so there's an opportunity. Suddenly, it's all the stars are aligning where you can put these Disney stars onto a label and it's going to sell a lot of copies of these records at the time.
So let me take a step back and because before we started recording, I shared with Ashley that I did not grow up with the Disney Channel. I lived in rural Texas. And actually when we got cable for the first time, which I believe was probably when I was in sixth grade, that's when Disney Channel was still a premium channel. So I watched Nickelodeon because that was, what was available to me. Um, I grew up thinking that that there was this divide between Nickelodeon and the Disney Channel, whereas like the Nickelodeon, if you were a tween or a teenager, like you watched Nickelodeon because you were not watching a lot of Disney Channel because, and you write in the book, it was in the beginnings, it was a younger audience. To talk about the beginning of the Disney Channel quickly, um, tell us a little bit about what was showing up on the Disney Channel before kind of this moment where they realized these teenage stars or these kid stars can be really, really big. What was on there? And do you know the specific, do you know the reason why they made it a premium channel when they first offered it?
yeah, what you see happening in the early 1980s when Disney Channel launches, well, the Disney Channel as it was known at the time, is that cable TV is starting to really take off, but it's taking off in this fractured way where you have things like the Arts and Entertainment Channel, the Discovery Channel, everything, the Nature Channel, everything is catering to a small audience, and you want people that are really passionate about that. And so I think what Disney Channel or the Disney, sorry, as a company sees value in having a Disney Channel is mainly to service the Walt Disney Company and serve as a promotional tool for everything they've got going on. So they had just opened Epcot. They've got their parks business is still the huge moneymaker. So they're interested in that. And so I think I don't know the exact reasons why it went premium instead of basic, other than if you're a premium, you don't have to have advertising in the same way that
Okay.
basic cable does. So you're not going to sacrifice the minutes you could spend promoting yourself, which later we
Hmm.
very much see in the 2000s with Disney Channel using those interstitials to promote their own brand. You're able to just talk about Disney all the time. And so, but what the content becomes, and I think the original vision that the first president and creator of Disney Channel had was that this would fill a hole and be a space where they could air Disney Channel theatrical films that had left theaters that were in the vaults that were because this was still like VHS was taking off,
Hmm.
but it was still maybe you didn't have that whole library at home and you couldn't, obviously it wasn't on demand, so they could promote those Disney films and have them on cable. So that was part of it. And then I think what they quickly realize is as a premium cable channel, you are inherently catering to the parents because the parents are paying the bill. So to have someone feel good about signing up and spending their money on a new channel, which their branding was the family channel. So it wasn't just a kids channel, it was for the whole family to come
Hmm.
together around. Um, what they've realized is we've got to appease these parents, and parents, as you're talking about this edutainment, parents feel good if the kids are learning things. So you've got Nickelodeon, which is already taking off and popular in the 1980s, which is very much for kids only. This is fun, this is gross, this is messy, this is just a space for kids. You probably aren't going to learn anything, but it's going to be enjoyable to watch. So that's their vibe there. And Disney has this realization that for parents to feel good, we've got to serve up something of value. So they start doing things. There's a lot of nature programming. There are the American Teacher Awards. They're airing kind of this hodgepodge of content. So you've got shows like Kids Incorporated and the All New Mickey Mouse Club, which are very entertaining and cool. But you've also got this like Mother Goose nursery rhymes type show. There's and then a lot of classic Disney IP is coming in as well. So Mickey Mouse is very prevalent on the channel. There's something called Mousercise, which is
Hmm.
the Mickey and friends in costume, like doing jazzercise with kids. So it's just, and it was successful. Like to be fair, it was doing well. It was hitting its targets. It's just a small audience because it's premium, but it's also not building a brand really. It's not, you don't look at the channel and the lineup of content they had and immediately go, ah, that's Disney Channel. It's just, they're syndicating things, they're acquiring content that's already existing. There's some originals they're doing in original movies, but it's just, it doesn't have a cohesive look and feel. And what Disney really had through the 80s and through the 90s, even though in the early 90s we start to have this animation renaissance with Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Little Mermaid, and that's incredibly popular and brings Disney, really to the forefront. But that's still catering to a young audience. That's still a little bit like you outgrow that. Maybe as an adult or later you have such a love and respect, but for a 12 and 13-year-old, it starts to be uncool to carry
Hmm.
a Lion King lunchbox. And so you've got this stigma around Disney that it is babyish, that it's for little kids. And Disney Channel is feeding into that with some of the cartoons by having Mickey prevalent on the network. So they're really tasked with how do we find a way to expand this channel and make it palatable to a tween audience, which is what starts to change in the mid 90s when you have a complete executive turnover at the network and they bring in executives who were previously at Nickelodeon and they start to try and find a way to make Disney Channel cool and fun. They had done a focus group where they asked kids to compare Nickelodeon and Disney to foods. And the result
Yeah.
was Nickelodeon is pizza, Disney Channel is broccoli. Like no one wants to be broccoli and attract viewers. Like it's not, might be healthy, but it's not going to satisfy the people. So they really are working to find a way to change that image. But what they find as well is that Disney, the name Disney, the brand Disney, does come with these expectations, does come with a value set of what people expect from Disney. And so you see shows like So Weird, which was this very dark, supernatural, spooky show that was critically acclaimed. Audiences loved it, but they didn't like seeing it on Disney Channel because it didn't feel like what they wanted a Disney show to be. Um, so yeah, all of that just to say that they were really trying to find a way to modernize Disney, a way to make something new at a time when I think culture was shifting as well. They had done a bunch of surveys that kids wanted to be closer to their parents. They wanted to watch TV with them. They didn't want to necessarily kick them out of the room. And so Channel was really looking for ways to bring everyone together.
Yeah. Would you do you think that about this time, because this was later 90s that this was like when they really started to tap into, hey, let's find a way to make the Disney Channel more attractive to a wider audience, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Do do you think that was part of a larger shift across the company that because I'm especially thinking about like after Epcot Center opened, as I alluded to, they had these educational programs, and Epcot was the educational park. And when you come, you're supposed to learn at living with the land. And I remember going into the Wonders of Life Pavilion, and I remember working out with, I can't remember what it was called, but it was Goofy. Like they would show Goofy's like how-to videos, and you would like be able to ride, stationary bikes and everything. I remember those. Um, and then, there does seem to be this shift toward we still want to have that image of educating people and being that edutainment as they've always promoted themselves, as I said, but we want to be more like we want to be more attractive to the general population as well in general entertainment. And that, then that led to like when Bob Iger took over the purchase of Pixar, the purchase of all the acquisitions that were made. The Pixar example reminds me of what you talked about with like the food example, where, when Disney purchased Pixar, it was at a time where families were more trusting of the Pixar brand than they were the Disney brand. And so do you think this shift on the Disney Channel to let's kind of modernize this, let's make it more popular amongst um, the general population, was that part of a larger shift within the company? Like basically was the whole ship going that way? Or was there something more nuanced going on?
I think that what was happening kind of more on a granular level even was these executives that came in the mid 90s to Disney Channel. And yes, they had come from Nickelodeon, but they also, many of them had an education background. Anne Sweeney, who was became president of Disney Channel, she had a master's in education from Harvard and had worked in that space. Jerry Laybourne, who was overseeing her and the Disney TV networks, she also had an education background. So they've brought in people that see the value in education, but are also very conscious of not just directly spoon feeding that to kids and doing it through storytelling. And I think, you see around that same time, um, Disney I'm thinking of like theatrical films when you talk about the broader thing, and something like Remember the Titans, where they're, that is educational to a lot of kids,
Hmm.
and teaching them about a specific time in history and racism and civil rights, and through this very specific story that's very entertaining and moving. And Disney Channel was really doing that as well. They had, especially through the DCOMs, the Disney Channel original movies. So they start using those as a space to really go in on the drama, but also as a vehicle for history. And they had one called The Color of Friendship, which was about apartheid in South Africa. There's a movie called True Confessions, and that deals with a kid with a learning disability, and different challenges. And so they're looking at ways to do that edutainment. I don't know if they were really looking at it beyond the channel, and in the greater Disney company, because what was really happening at the time is that in the late 90s, when they're revamping all of this, when Disney Channel is going from premium cable to basic cable, it's still very much the bottom rung of the Disney corporate ladder. No one is really paying that much attention to Disney Channel. It's not super lucrative. It's not buzzy in the way that the theme parks are in the theatrical films. And so I don't feel like there was the communication also between Disney corporate and the mandate coming down of, this is our new thing at Disney, and make sure your content all falls in line. I think it was more so coming from those executives within, and finding their way of what was making parents happy and the kids, and entertaining them as a family.
And now a message from Cody's Inner Dialogue. Hey, Guy. Hey, Guy. Guy. Inner Inner Dialogue, are you talking to me? Yeah, who else would I be talking to? Well, you're talking to Guy. Yeah, that's your new name, remember? No, no, it's not. My name is still Cody. It's not being changed to Guy. It'll grow on you. Give us the time. Nope, won't grow on me. What are you doing here? We gotta talk. I need some more acknowledgement for what I do around here. Okay, what do you mean acknowledgement for what you do around here? You mean like interrupt me, be put me down, like tell me, oh come on, man, you know I do a lot around here. Like what? I, I'm I am the creative force behind this podcast. I mean, without me, what would you be doing? Well, I got through about 140 something episodes before you came along. Oh, come on. I mean, yeah, but you said it yourself. I've made the show better. I should get some credit. You should get some credit. Yeah, that's what are you talking about? Like like I direct the show. You don't direct the show. Well, I definitely produce it. No, you don't. Here, just listen. What if we said, being a fan of Disney, the podcast, hosted by Guy, produced by Guy's Inner Dialogue. Again, no, we're not using Guy. It's Cody. Okay, that Guy's off the table. Just stop. Fine. Here we go. Being a fan of Disney, the podcast, hosted by Cody, produced by Cody's Inner Dialogue. No, I don't really like that either. I do. You'll like it. No, I don't think I ever will. It'll grow on you. Yeah, just it'll grow on you. It's not going to grow on me. Everybody, please remember, being a fan of Disney the book is available on Amazon, and the Prospectus Files is available on Kindle Velo. Please check them both out. Now back to our show. Wait. What? Inner Dialogue? What? As the producer of the show, you're not the producer of the show. As the producer of the show, I am the one who gets to tell people to go back to the episode. Yeah, whatever. Inner Dialogue. I'm sorry, everyone. Now back to our show. Okay. Um, the another thing that just stuck out to me from the very beginning when you started talking, you grew up in Orlando, but you said it was one of the last places
Mhm.
that the channel went like from premium to just included in cable packages. That is fascinating to me, being that that is where Walt Disney World is located.
It had more to do, yes. It's more, I think it was Time Warner, and it was their deals with
Okay.
Time Warner and the markets that they were including Disney Channel in their basic cable packages. They were one of the last holdouts, as was New York, the New York metro area. And so I talk about in the book, but that's a little bit of how Disney Channel kind of caught a lot of people off guard, is that New York also was one of the final markets to
Hmm.
have it on basic. So you've got, and that's where all of Nickelodeon and Viacom corporate is based. So all of the ad, it's Disney Channel isn't premium. So, or sorry, Disney Channel isn't basic yet there. So they're not watching it at home. And then because they're not running ads on Disney Channel, they continued, even when they went basic, they just ran these interstitials that allowed
Hmm.
them to continue to promote their own Disney properties. So it's not showing up in ad reports. So the growth isn't visible to these executives in New York in a way that it might be if they were just watching it at home and they can see the content and the changes. They're not interested in it. And when you talk about competition between Nickelodeon and Disney Channel, I do not think Nickelodeon thought Disney Channel was competition for a very long time.
Yeah.
It was not, this was not, a battle to the top through the 90s. It was really Nickelodeon was king and Disney was doing something completely different. And then they started to suddenly encroach on that territory. And so when New York finally switched to having Disney as basic cable, suddenly all of these executives are like shocked because they see what Disney has become, this content library that they've begun to build up, and that their kids are now desperate to watch it as well.
And it's a great lesson in it's a great lesson in strategic decision making. Like when I talk about marketing, I'm always talking to people about one thing you always have to do, you have to monitor what your competition is doing. And this reminds me, the competition between Disney Channel and Nickelodeon reminds me of the competition really between DC and Marvel, that DC was the brand and Marvel was no one was paying attention. And then, when Marvel started to kind of mix up what they were doing a little bit, telling different types of stories, that's when they started to overtake DC. And in large part because DC was not paying attention. That's fascinating to me that like and in a world now, maybe it wouldn't happen because people are more cognizant of you need to keep up with what your competition is doing. And you need to be looking for competition from various points, not just, you don't want to be surprised when
Mm-hmm.
something comes up. Um, can you tell us a little bit more about the competition and the rivalry between the Disney Channel or Disney Channel because they did drop the title. You talk about that in the book, and it's fascinating. You can mention that as well because it's one of those tidbits to me that I'm like, that's incredibly awesome. Um, but the competition between Disney Channel and Nickelodeon and what pushed Disney Channel past Nickelodeon, especially in the early 2000s.
Yeah. Well, okay, so Disney Channel, they dropped the V, I think it was 1997. And the reasoning was that it wasn't the Nickelodeon, and
Mhm.
you had the History Channel, the Travel Channel, which sound very like educational and
Yeah.
stodgy. And so they said, well, let's just drop the and we'll just be Disney Channel. There was a time I think they wanted to just be Disney and like have that just Disney on screen. You could refer to it as the channel, but corporate Disney did not want them to just be
Yeah.
Disney. They were like, you're going to stay the channel. Um, and yeah, what really I think starts to change everything in that competition is Lizzie McGuire and Hilary Duff. And suddenly the tween girl audience becomes incredibly valuable and a successful draw for Disney Channel. And you see Nickelodeon start to kind of play catch up and they start going all in on iCarly and Victorious and just really pumping out that slightly older content. Nickelodeon went way edgier than Disney Channel. They had a different ethos than what you see at Disney. But yeah, I think that what what pushed it and why Nickelodeon felt like we need to do something here is it stopped being just about a kids cable channel. So once Hilary Duff is putting out music on a Disney record label, and that kind of becomes the formula for everyone that follows. So Raven Simone with That's So Raven, she's putting out albums on Hollywood. And then extremely, especially with High School Musical and Hannah Montana, these two things that happened in 2006 just explode in a way that no one imagined. And suddenly you have kids' cable stars releasing albums that are the number one album on the Billboard charts, that are able to have theatrical movies that generate, millions and millions of dollars, but that also are merchandisable. And you can, because that's made Disney, it seems obvious now, but the Disney consumer products team, they had really only done animated merchandise. So they had only done merchandise based on like a stuffed Simba and, maybe the Little Mermaid or those characters, but it's animation. And they didn't really know if people would buy a shirt with a photo of an actor from TV, like if kids wanted that. And so there was a time when they weren't really leaning into merchandise, and until really it took off. I mean, with Raven, they did a bunch, and then especially though with Hannah Montana and High School Musical, and suddenly this is an empire, and it's billions and billions of dollars. And so Nickelodeon, of course, is like, well, we want in on that too. And they release soundtracks and albums with their stars, um, to varying success. I think Disney just had, once they had all of the different divisions somewhat agreeing and firing in tandem, um, no one could compete, because you've got Radio Disney, you've got a theatrical division, you've got the merchant, you've got everything lined up and in house, and it just became massive and a star making machine in a way that Nickelodeon really couldn't compete.
Well, and it to me, in my view, it carries over to what Disney, Disney Channel, and Nickelodeon are now as well. Where if you want to watch Disney shows, they are available on Disney Plus. If you want to watch Disney Channel shows, they're available on Disney Plus. They're also available, many of them available on Netflix. Um, Same thing for Nickelodeon. A lot are available on Netflix. Um, but the number of subscribers to Disney Plus versus the number of subscribers to Paramount Plus,
Mm.
Disney Plus far outperforms what Paramount Plus is doing. And there's a lot going on with Paramount right now, whether what it's going to happen to that company, what's going to happen to uh, Paramount Plus whenever, the dust settles. Um, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if, you with all the we got away from cable to go a la carte. Now everybody's bundling in. We're just doing it on streaming rather than cable. I wouldn't be surprised if, you could even access some things from Paramount on Disney Plus. But I think, as I said, as someone who is very interested in the competition between companies and between brands, it seems like it seems like the Disney apparatus and Disney Channel, once they found their footing and once they, as you kind of alluded to, snuck up on Nickelodeon, Nickelodeon has been playing catch up ever
Mm.
since. And I'm not sure if I'm misrepresenting that or if you feel differently on that.
Well, I think they're both in a lot of trouble now because kids aren't watching
Yeah.
cable TV and aren't even watching sitcoms really, or shows in the way, whether it's on a streamer, if it's an original on Disney Plus, they're on their phones, they're on YouTube, and they're on, TikTok, or they're consuming bite-sized content, and they're able to just get things from every angle. So, in the 2000s, you've got basically Nickelodeon, Disney Channel, Cartoon Network, and you pick up a remote and you choose the channel and you kind of camp out in front of it and see what's served to you. And now everything is so um, pick your own adventure and you can choose whatever you want. And so it's a lot harder for a company to push something on a kid, to push, say, this is our next star, this is our next show. We're going to put our resources behind making sure that this is the one that you're aware of and watching when the kids' eyeballs are all over the place. You know, it's a
Hmm.
lot easier when they're on Disney Channel already and you can start saying, okay, during the interstitial, we're going to have the star of our new show come out and like sit on a couch and chat with the star of our old show, and you're going to get to know the new kid, and then we're going to play an episode of the new show, and then it's all just going to be served up to you in this organic way where you see the crossover, and it's a continuation of what you already know and love, and you're open and ready to receive this new show. Now it's just really, I don't know that anyone knows the secret formula to what is making things pop or go viral, or um, who kids look up to. And I also think the nature of stardom has changed, the age of stars, which is probably a healthier thing and for the better. It's mostly now people are becoming mega famous in their 20s, or at the earliest in their late teens, versus someone like Miley Cyrus, who was 13 years old
Hmm.
when Hannah Montana started and became this superstar who is, causing mayhem at Ticketmaster. I think now, if you asked a lot of 8 year olds who the most famous person is to them, it's probably Taylor Swift, who is a woman
Hmm.
in her 30s. So it's just a completely different scenario than what we had in the 2000s with these very young kids being thrust into this extreme level of fame. And I don't think you can really have that right now because the ecosystem has changed so much. And so Nickelodeon, same thing. I mean, they they really they still, they both networks are putting out original sitcoms, or are doing much of the same type of content they were in the 2000s, but you probably haven't heard of any of it unless you have a child that exact age range they're catering to. Or something like Disney Channel has been leaning into these reboots of the shows from the 2000s, like Raven's
Hmm.
Home, which was a spinoff of That's So Raven, and now Wizards Beyond Waverly Place, which is a kind of retooled version of the Wizards of Waverly Place. But what was happening in the 2000s, Miley and High School Musical were so big that even if you weren't a child, if you didn't have kids, you knew what that was because it was inescapable. You've got Zac Efron on the cover of Rolling Stone and Miley Cyrus doing Annie Leibovitz shoots for Vanity Fair. Like, I can't think of any teen stars right now that are getting that kind of treatment. It doesn't happen.
Well, and on that topic, we'll go ahead and kind of get into combine talking about youth talent and some of the stories from your book. You write a lot of stories about Miley Cyrus and about Hannah Montana that I think are really, really interesting, and eye-opening and sad in a way. But one thing that stood out to me is I shared before we started recording that I kind of always thought, Nickelodeon was, um, because of what people have told me, was maybe the more not just kid-friendly like programming, but the more kid-friendly um, like work environment, if you will. That Disney Channel, and what you write about in the book is Disney Channel or the Walt Disney Company was so controlling over Disney Channel that it could have, while it could have made people feel as though, they don't have control over their careers and they don't have control over certain things that are happening in their shows and beyond their shows to keep their careers moving. It also seems like there were a time or two, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it seems like in the book it was alluded to, while the things that happened that we now know happened at Nickelodeon would have been more difficult under the Walt Disney apparatus because of the company's oversight and their very, very strict oversight. It, Is that correct, or did I miss the mark
Yeah,
on that?
I think in a lot of ways that is correct. So yes, what you're saying, because what Disney had that Nickelodeon didn't have is uh this legacy of um almost, it's almost like a religious platform in a way,
Hmm.
of you've got this legacy of Walt Disney and Mickey Mouse and what that means to generations and generations of people, who come to the theme parks, who go to the theaters, who have invested a trust in a company because they know the type of content it serves will always fall within a certain parameter. And so with that hanging over everything, it starts to um, permeate the corporate building. Everyone I would talk to would say a version of, there was this quote unquote culture of fear, in a sense of, um, you're never bigger than the Disney brand. Everyone is replaceable. If you try and
Hmm.
color outside the lines, there's no problem cutting you. And that's, a lot of that is on a practicality level. That is to keep the trains running on time. Disney is also notoriously tight-fisted. They like to keep the budgets small and not spend anything excess. So if you're, at odds with management, if you're starting to say, well, I want to try something different. Let's have this character do something new, and let's build new sets. And even if there's nothing nefarious necessarily going on, it's just maybe as a creative they're trying to keep themselves entertained or interested. Disney, even if you were a showrunner on a show that was making them a lot of money, what we see happen is they will say, all right, you're out, because it's not, you are replaceable.
Yeah.
um, and so the effect of that, on the one hand, is that yes, you don't see someone, um, Dan Schneider at Nickelodeon, who, many of the allegations and admitted things have been around him. He was making so much money for Nickelodeon, and he was doing show after show after show after show. Even when what we now know and have heard, some of the tension behind the scenes, some of the tumults, that it was just not a great environment. And so at Disney, you really don't see any showrunners working on more than two, maybe three shows, but it's not in succession. It's like, oh, they might come
Mhm.
back a few years later and get to something else. But you, more often than not, what you see is the showrunners of these incredibly successful shows, like a Hannah Montana. Um, that show wraps up, and then they're never seen again at Disney Channel. So it's like they just cycle in and out of people. And you see on That's So Raven, a showrunner replaced in the middle of the first season because largely due to disagreements with the writers' room, and that there was just, it was causing discord. And so it's not, I don't think it's necessarily always that Disney was looking out for everyone and was concerned
Hmm.
about um, their emotional and mental health and that sort of thing. A lot of it, I think, is this is a hiccup. This is not allowing us to
Yeah.
produce things in an orderly manner. But then the byproduct of that is, okay, well, then you are helping prevent some of these more toxic environments from continuing. But what that also does, when you have this legacy and this brand hanging over everything, is it puts an incredible amount of pressure, especially on the young performers and the child actors who are operating within that system, because suddenly you're an actor and you're playing a character, but you're also a role model to kids around
Hmm.
America. And something that was drilled into them, very early on, is that kids look up to you, don't disappoint them. And also in their contracts, they've got clauses. There's a morals clause in a lot of them that say, in this kind of broad, flowery language, that they're not allowed to do anything to bring disgrace to the company, or, basically in a hazy way, just making sure that they do not step out of line,
Yeah.
both legally in a contract, and then also just from, oh, wouldn't that be horrible to make kids sad, and that pressure on them. And so that level of pressure, of um, just making them feel that the eyes of America were on them. I think Nickelodeon kids didn't have that. They also were aware, I think, that they were on kids TV, that this is a young audience, but it wasn't to the same degree of, if you mess up, this is jeopardizing everything.
Yeah.
And so that's really unique to Disney.
And that's kind of one of those that is it you also talk in the book about when certain instances when some of these teen actors, these child actors um they would get into some type of trouble. They would get into some type of I guess PR situation that was embarrassing to them as developing people, and could be embarrassing to the company. There were a few examples you talk about where it really did seem like the channel and the broader company did kind of step in and say, these are developing individuals. They're not, they are coming into their own. They're coming into adulthood. And so it didn't seem like there were examples of that culture of fear. It also seemed like there were examples of, and maybe it had to do with how much money, how successful the shows were, that kind of at least giving the impression that they were standing behind
Yes,
some of their
a level of
actors.
sympathy. I think that's definitely something I heard that would be the stance taken around the hallways at Disney corporate. Something like Vanessa Hudgens' nude photo leak. People told me that, well, behind the scenes, Disney seemed like they weren't shaming her; they were very concerned about her. But then you also have her having to put out this public
Yeah,
statement and
yeah,
apologizing for that she's so embarrassed and horrified, and it's basically her fault that these photos are out there because she took them to begin with. And and then same thing with Miley Cyrus with the Vanity Fair photo shoot where she had the
hmm,
appearance of being topless from the back. And so you have some, I heard stories of Rich Ross in the corporate meeting saying what you were mentioning, where he would go around the room and be like, we have to remember, like, these are kids, they're going to make mistakes, and if we wanted perfect people, we would just do animated work, and then those animated characters will never mess up, but these are real kids. So you have that kind of behind the scenes, but then you also have Rich Ross and Anne Sweeney hopping on a plane immediately to Tennessee
yeah,
to confront Miley's parents, Tish and Billy Ray, because Disney Channel was not across that photo shoot. That's the case. Miley got so famous and so popular that her cachet was enough that her management team could just book her an Annie Leibovitz photo shoot in Vanity Fair. And Disney was completely caught off guard. So that's where they say, okay, you've crossed a line. And they're going to the parents to say that better not happen again, basically, because there's so much at stake with the economics. But I think you're also right. Miley is a huge star. They're not going to cut her out of her show. They're not going to cancel Hannah Montana. Um, if it were someone in a supporting role that wasn't as valuable to the company, that might have been the line that they said, okay, you're out, like that they're not going to jeopardize that. But yeah, I did hear a lot of stories, and especially I think on an individual level from people that worked on these shows, many of them, did feel a sense of responsibility and that they were helping these kids grow up. Many of them were parents themselves of young kids at that time. And so they saw that responsibility. At the same time, it's a business, and this is
yeah,
um, their bottom line is uh, making money. So as kind and compassionate as you can be to kids, there's also a lot of stuff that is really heartbreaking because they're making decisions based on, even when it comes down from the very beginning of casting, when you're looking at a kid and saying, are you cute enough? Are you going to be popular enough? Like, yes, no, cut, cut, cut. And so, like, it's an industry built on rejection. And for a young kid going through that, it's incredibly challenging to be put in that position and to be expected to work at a young age in a workplace full of adults. Um, yeah, so I think it's a mix. There's a lot of compassion, but there's also an understanding that this is a business and this is a brand you have to live up to.
yeah. And within the book, uh, like there are so many examples of, like, one thing we talked about earlier where you didn't have showrunners that would stay on for multiple shows, and you had showrunners replaced between seasons, sometimes in season, at these shows. There was also something I came across that was really, really interesting. And I kind of label it the 65 episode rule, that you talked about. Can you tell us what that was and kind of what the purpose of the 65 episode rule was?
Yeah, I think that people think the 65 episode rule is a lot more like there's a lot more lore behind it than it does, and that it was this really cruel rule they invented to just, you know, cut these shows off. It's basically, and it was a hangover from an earlier era of the way that cable TV divvied up their programming. And so with 65 episodes, that's the amount of episodes the minimum amount you need to have to re-air in syndication the episodes. I think it's
Okay.
4 days a week for 13 weeks, and then which is a quarter.
Hmm.
And then you can start over the next quarter with a new show. So it gives you, by having 65 episodes, you've given yourself enough content that you can swap out each quarter and run a full series. And so like if and everyone always refers to it as Disney Channel's 65 episode rule. But if you look at like Clarissa Explains It All at Nickelodeon, that was 65 episodes. Keenan
Hmm.
and Kel, I believe, was 65 episodes. Like it was a thing that a lot of cable TV was doing at the time. And it was monetary. It was after 65 episodes, it becomes more you're either gonna you're messing up the grid and you don't have a new show and a new block of programming to pop in. So it's you're better off scrapping that, starting fresh with a new show that then you can build up to 65 to plug in as well. So it's not that exciting. It's uh, but they what started to happen, and they planned to expand Lizzie McGuire beyond 65 because Hilary Duff had gotten so famous and was so beloved that the value was there in having more Lizzie than just another routine show. And so they wanted to expand that, but because Hillary was so famous, she no longer wants to do the show. The budget no longer allows to pay Hillary to do the show, and a lot of things happen. So, but after that, That's So Raven is the first one, and it goes well beyond the 65 rule, and you start to see most of the Disney Channel shows no longer adhere to that because the value is more in continuing to have the presence of these stars and the beloved characters on screen than just any old content slotted in.
And specific to like Miley Cyrus and Hannah Montana, what's so interesting about, and it happened to, I know it happened to Demi Lovato, and it happens to, and uh, sadly, it happens to more female um, stars than it does male stars just because of the way society looks at female stars versus male stars and looks at different genders. And but you anytime that somebody would, even if they were leaving the company or leaving the Disney Channel show, it kind of, there was this narrative for a little bit that once someone leaves a children's show, oh no, they're going, they're acting out, or they're doing something that they shouldn't be doing. I mean, how could this happen? Like, how could they allow this to happen to themselves? And you really did see a lot of these stars grow up in the public life, and start at a very young age, but then especially, which there were some unfortunate examples that you write about in the book, that just some unfortunate, some downright gross examples, I think, that you write about in the book with some of these young stars, but not specifically with the company, but like with interviews and things like that. Um, but then when they are kind of reaching that age of adulthood, um, there was this narrative that, oh, what happened to this actress, or what happened to this person, or what happened, we can watch their shows and look how they looked on the show and look at them now. Um, what do you think is behind that narrative? that 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 people would place on these child stars as they aged up and as they reached into adulthood.
Well, I think first, by nature of being on TV or in movies, as a kid, you are immortalized in time. So people see you forever as whatever age you are in your most popular project. So for someone like Hannah Montana or like Miley Cyrus, who comes on to Hannah Montana at 13, and that's how people see you. And she, by the time she finishes the show, she's 17 and then 18 years old when it's still airing. Um, that is very hard for people to accept that you're growing up and you're not
Mhm.
the character and the person that they remember, and especially with something like Miley. And when you're on a show that is a kid show, I think Dakota Fanning is an interesting example too, because she's a kid who worked from a very young age, but doing very adult
Mhm.
content. And so, her transition to an adult actress, I think people might have been more willing to accept her because she had always been doing these kind of dramatic roles and she wasn't just the cute kid on TV. For someone like Miley Cyrus, uh, there was such uh, it seemed like there was such an unwillingness from the public at the time to accept that she was not the same person as the character she played on TV. And Miley was very much, from everyone that I spoke to, the way they described her is like Miley was always Miley. She knew who she was. She was this wild child spitfire. She was not going to conform and do whatever anyone wanted her to do. She just was herself through and through. And so when you have someone like that, and you have someone who's becoming an adult, a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, that's a time when most of us are graduating high school, going away to college, experimenting with things, figuring out who we are, making changes to our appearance, cutting hair, dyeing hair, whatever. So also in the contracts, like these kids can't make drastic changes to their appearance while
Mhm.
they're on the show, that she can't just cut her hair and dye it and do whatever she wants. So you see what seems like this shocking overhaul later in the Bangers era when she, chops off her hair and she's got this stoner persona and is very different. But I think it's not that different than what a lot of kids go through when they go to college. They're just not doing
Yeah.
it in the public eye. And also by nature of her career, she's a performer. So she's going to, perform and be doing that on stage. And I think you also see it happen in an extreme way because it almost has to be the shock value to let
Yeah.
people see you in a different light. You can't just subtly be like, I'm growing up now. It's got to almost be like, look, I am not that person. I'm going to be completely R rated or whatever it may be so that you no longer associate me with this cutesy character that you think I am. And so I think there's a desire from a lot of the stars to really um, cut that cord and make it a drastic change. And then there's also the popular backlash from the public that's like this pearl clutching, like, oh, this
Mhm.
isn't the little girl we know. And I think it's changing a bit now. I think we have a lot more understanding of um, maybe just humanity and letting people grow up. But I think also social media has allowed a lot of these young stars the ability to just, you know, have more of that constant communication and concert with their audience and show who they really are versus who I am in a manufactured way on TV and media appearances that they want to present. So I think a lot of it's just a natural growth transition from kid to adult, but it plays out in more extreme ways because they're trying to make that break.
And now a message from Cody's Inner Dialogue. Hey, Inner Dialogue. Yeah, what's going on? Did you know that Kindle Vella is winding down, and so all of the stories on Kindle Vella will be able to be turned into ebooks through Kindle um, as soon as you want them to be. Oh, really? Yeah. So does that mean you're going to finish the prospectus files? Well, yeah. I mean that's the goal anyway. Um, well, that's nice. I mean, finally, gotta get that thing finished. I mean, you just keep writing and writing and writing. Okay, inner dialogue. Yeah. Thanks for that. Yes, I will be finishing that soon. What? How soon is soon? Soon. I mean, come on.
What can people expect? The hope is that I get it finished by early December so that it can be available for people for Christmas gifts if they want. Oh yeah, yeah, that's good. Good luck with that. Oh, thanks for the vote of confidence. Oh no, I mean it in the best way possible. I'm sure you're gonna stop writing on it and you're just gonna wrap it up. Well, it is almost wrapped up. I mean, come on, well, I, come on, just spare me if I have a hard time believing that. Inner dialogue, come on, hey, I'm proud of you, buddy. Yeah, go ahead, finish that thing up right now. Yeah. All right, everyone. As always, being a fan of Disney, the book is available on Kindle, and the prospectus files is expected to be available on Kindle in early December as well. So look out for it for Christmas lists. Yeah, yeah. Look out for it for a Christmas gift, everybody. Inner dialogue. That's not very nice. Yeah, yeah. Good luck on that. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, everyone. Now back to our show.
The what are some other kind of interesting examples or interesting stories that stuck out to you about essentially kids growing up in this public in the public eye? I mean, you write about the Jonas Brothers, it's about Selena Gomez, Demi Lovato, and what were some of the things that maybe were eye-opening or most interesting to you when you were researching this book?
There's so much. I think, I mean, something you kind of, I think, referred to a minute ago, with the gross coverage, but like just going back in the research and looking at the way that the media was talking about some of these young girls, like Hilary Duff at the time when she was 15 at I think it was the Teen Choice Awards, and Rolling Stone wrote an article about her, and they made a point to mention that they caught a glimpse of her pink thong, and they only saw it because she was crouching down to like sign an autograph for a fan in a wheelchair. And yet, like, this male reporter thinks that's of value to put in an article about a child. Like, the whole thing is just, I don't think you would have that today. And so the way that some of those girls were talked about and dissected, same with Miley, at an early age, and the way there was so much fretting about that these girls were about to go off the deep end. And I think this is happening at the same time when you see Britney Spears going through a mental health crisis, when she enters the conservatorship, when her kids are taken away, shaves her head, all of these things that were very visceral, I guess, to people, and gave them an excuse to judge, frankly, young women in the spotlight. And so the way they're talking about Miley is, and just like almost this faux concern, but also a reason why we can just, hyper fixate on her every
Mhm.
move. And someone like Perez Hilton, who's blogging and, taking like upskirt photos of her when she's a minor, and just a really horrible environment on that front. And then, I mean, other things like uh, with Raven Simone, um, when she was on That's So Raven, and the way that Disney Channel executives were like not comfortable with her weight when she would gain weight, and they were, doing some things behind the scenes, and physically like manipulating the film to make her look thinner. And when I talked to them about it, there was kind of this air of, well, we were trying to protect her, we wanted it to be flattering, and like, okay, but also like you're not comfortable with who she is. And so it's just a lot of these things that were um, partly a product of the culture at the time, and just remembering what that was like is, uh, you know, a bit shocking always to go back into that vault.
Yeah, and I mean, there are several things that stood out to me that I was like, oh, this is very, very interesting. To be honest, going into the book, and as I said, I always listen to the audible versions of books. So when I listen, going when I first read about this book or found out about it, and wanted to listen to it. Um, I wasn't sure what type of stories I would get out of it. And there are a mixture of those very, very gross stories and situations of like these kids, both female and male, growing up and this limelight and having to uh, go through the things as you said that we all go through, and when we're going off to college and things like that, but nobody's looking at us, that they're having to go through. But there were also stories of how at least at least it seemed like you said people working for either the company or on these productions did care about these kids and did care about their development and not just about if they're ready for it to film an episode, if they're ready for this new season. And so that was something that, again, I'm not sure what I was expecting out of the book, but I came away thinking it was a really, really good representation on your part of here's what people thought they were doing well. Here's some things that did not go well, and here's like in between. And so it was a really, really fun, it was a really, really interesting read or listen in my case. So you did an amazing job.
Thank you.
thank you for the book.
No, thank you. I
Um,
mean that well, I mean that's something that was really important to me was just to kind of have um I didn't really have an angle or an agenda going into this. I really just wanted to pull back the curtain and see what the reality of being a part of this system at the time was. And so, through talking to as many people as possible and getting this mixture of stories, I wanted to show exactly what you said, like the good and the bad and everything in between. And I'm glad that that came across to you. And I'm also really glad you enjoyed the audiobook, which is narrated by Lelaine from
mhm.
Lizzie McGuire, who played Miranda Sanchez, and she did a wonderful job with that.
And so the next thing on the list was actually talking about kind of like what do you think led to the quote unquote fall of the Disney Channel? We addressed that a little bit earlier. Um, when we talked about how, people are consuming media now, and they're not consuming Disney Channel or Nickelodeon, or they're not consuming streaming, and what I have noticed since the launch of Disney Plus, it was earlier in 2024 that the fourth live action Descendants movie was released. There is an animated special in there as well. But the fourth live action was released, and it was released, I believe, on Disney Channel and maybe the next day on Disney Plus, or it might have
No,
even been the
no,
same
it's even
time.
crazy. No, it's even crazier than that. It was released on Disney Plus,
And
and then
then, okay.
a month, I think it was a month and a half later on Disney Channel.
So do you think, in your impression, do you think more of the intended audience is watching Disney Plus than they are Disney Channel?
Yes.
Okay.
Um, I mean, the intended audience for a Descendants, yes, for all of it really, but Descendants um, fits the mold of the era of what the book covers, which is in the 2000s. So it's really catered to that tween audience. Same with Zombies, like those are that audience. What you see on the channel over the last 10 years is it's gotten increasingly younger, and
Hmm.
it's really just gone. I mean, now I think it's mostly like eight, like 6 to 10 or something. It's really young. And so there's no longer this idea that you're going to get a massive amount of 12-year-olds watching your cable TV.
Hmm.
It's really just young, and it's so much smaller. So it's much more on Disney Plus, I think.
And one thing that makes me think that the demographic is on Disney Plus now is one of the live 24-hour live channels is, I think it's called Disney Playtime, which is a lot of your Disney Junior
Hmm.
shows.
Hmm.
And you know, has shows from like Mickey Mouse Clubhouse to Bluey, and which, I mean, Bluey is a cultural phenomenon in
Yeah.
itself that um that that is one, speaking as someone who has two kids, that would kind of be like at the beginning of what Disney Channel, I guess, focus would have been like in the early 2000s. Uh, when a Descendants movie comes out, we're watching it as soon as it comes out. When Bluey episodes come out, I mean, this year they released two batches of what they call mini-sodes.
Hmm.
Like we're watching those as soon as they come out,
Yeah.
and those are on repeat a lot. Whereas those, you know, the Disney Channel original movies are on the Throwback Channel,
Hmm.
which, and they're mixed in with everything. They're mixed in with a whole lot of productions. You know, you have last night I turned, or 2 nights ago I turned it on, and Toy Story was on there. Yesterday I turned it on, and High School Musical 2's on there. Whereas, you know, like the Disney Playtime is, you know, if I turn this on, uh what I'm gonna get on a pretty consistent level.
Right.
Um on the topic of child stars, you've said many times that some of the things that happen would not happen now, as far as maybe some of the more negative aspects,
Hmm.
um, would that were allowed to happen, especially before, you know, um, there were the more regulations as far as what child actors could do. Some of those things that were allowed to happen would not happen now. But do you also think, because of the way people consume media, is it harder to become a child, like somebody who's recognized now, than it was in the early 2000, late 90s, early 2000s?
As a professional actor, yes. Um, like through the channels that we saw, like a Selena and a Miley, and coming up through, doing commercials or local like Barney, and then getting on the Disney Channel, and that really you don't see stars happening in that way today. But it is incredibly easy for people to film their kids and put them on social media and make money off it. And
Mhm.
that's kind of the Wild West right now of what you're seeing with these mom influencers and kid influencers. And they've started to introduce legislation in certain states, putting up some safe rail, like guardrails around their finances. There was no Coogan law, which is something with child actors and child labor laws that it's a state law still, but like in California, for instance, these actors, from Disney Channel, 15% of their earnings have to be immediately put from the production company into a trust that the kid can only they can open when they turn 18. So their parents can't be taking all their money and leaving them penniless. So with the internet and with people making content for socials, most states still there's no rules around who gets that money. You could be a kid that your parents are putting you online and having you perform every day and you see none of that money. There's also no rules around working hours. You're in your house. You're not stamping a work permit. Kids on Disney Channel sets or other sets, it's all tracked, and the hours you have to stick. There's sometimes there are loopholes and there are things that they can go over, but for the most part, it's these laws and these union rules are governing a lot of this down to the minute. And so with the internet, it's really just the Wild West, not to mention privacy laws that, these kids, a 2-year-old isn't consenting necessarily to have their face
Yeah.
be remembered forever by everyone and rack up millions of views on TikTok. So I think that's, but you see them, some of them become very famous. And for the moment, I don't know the longevity of it. Someone like Ryan's World, which is a YouTube, I
Yeah.
don't know if you know,
Yeah.
yeah. So like he's made a ton of money, and that's a strange space that he has found to dominate. But it's so different. It's just, I don't know, other than maybe a child actor who was in who gives an Oscar-worthy performance in a prestige movie, and that gets a lot of attention, but that's not necessarily making you beloved by kids.
Yeah.
You're getting recognition from the industry, and maybe it sets you up for a great career acting, but it's just so different today.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. I mean, I've had conversations with people before about, the new child actors are the people that are being put on social media. The interesting thing is, and there have been reports of this of people who grew up in the public eye talking about how, how much control did they really have over things. Um, I think that is probably more prevalent, or I don't know. It seems more prevalent now that you have somebody, everybody has a phone, everybody has a camera that you could just, hey, I'm going to take this quick video of my kid and then I'm going to post it and then something goes viral and you're like, "Oh, hey, we're going to keep doing stuff like this whether the kid, realizes it."
Yeah,
At first, they probably think it's really, really cool. And then, but eventually they reach a point where, maybe they don't agree to that. And then you get to that moment of, well, was there consent? Like,
right.
was there consent to do these things or not? And so I think it's really, really interesting to see essentially what will happen in the future as this generation grows up.
I think there's going to be
Um,
a lot of very angry former kids
yeah.
when they realize that their whole lives have been consumed, um, you know, by others. And because like we were saying, like when you're a kid actor on TV, similarly, that's how you're seen forever. So if you go viral, like if you're the Four Seasons baby, the Four
Hmm.
Seasons of Orlando baby, I mean, maybe as a baby, then you're not as recognizable as an adult, but like something that forever is associated with you. And I don't think that family had any ill intent or thought it was going to blow up, but like, now you're on immortalized forever in that way, and you had no say in it. So it's a
Yeah.
strange thing.
Yeah, it is very interesting with just social media in general now, like what what will society look like in the future? Before we get to I like to wrap up with some rapid questions. Before we get to that, uh, two things. First, is there anything else that you think is interesting to cover that I either glossed over or just didn't cover at all from the book?
I feel like you did a really good job going through the main points of the book. Yeah, I think we talked about most of the shows and the actors that are covered. I also go into the Mickey Mouse Club in the 90s and that period of transition in the 90s when they were finding their footing and they were a little bit all over the place doing reality TV like Bug Juice. And so I think some of that's interesting. But I think for the most part, yeah, we hit it all.
Okay, thank you. There was one thing when you were saying that I thought of a few months ago when the Eras tour
Mhm.
dropped on Disney Plus. Um, I had a few people on to talk about that, and we talked about some of the connections between Taylor Swift and the Walt Disney Company, and all the kind of loose connections to Disney Channel.
Yeah.
In your in your research, did you find anything that the Walt Disney Company tried? Did they ever try to get Taylor Swift to join Disney Channel? Did you ever find anything like that?
No, not Disney Channel. They did. So the Hannah Montana movie, she has a cameo in that, and she co-wrote one of Miley's big songs, "You'll Always Find Your Way Back Home," for that movie. And then she also performs another one of her songs, "Crazier," in the movie. There's also things like she appeared. Jonas Brothers did a concert film, and she comes out and she's involved in that. There's a lot of crossover. Like she's good friends with Selena Gomez. She dated Joe Jonas. She's kind of like always floating in that orbit. I think Taylor, by the time Disney Channel was really um, going and firing and knowing what they wanted to do, her debut album was 2006. Yeah. Yeah, same. It actually it debuted the same day as I believe, or maybe 2007. It debuted the same day as the Miley Cyrus Hannah Montana duel album,
Hmm.
which
Okay.
that album premiered at number one on Billboard, and Taylor was like 19 or something.
Hmm.
So it's interesting to see how she's risen. But she, I don't think, I don't know that they courted her for anything beyond, um, what she ended up doing for them. I'm not sure.
Do you know, are there any because this last year, uh, Miley Cyrus was inducted as a
Disney legend.
Disney legend. Thank you. Uh, do you know, has that happened to any other person who's gotten their start on Disney Channel?
No, no, she's the first and she's the youngest. And I know there's a lot of fan uh chatter and animosity. A lot of fans online, think Raven should have been the first, that there's a lot of debates of who had the bigger influence of Raven versus Miley. I love Raven. I think Raven's show was really groundbreaking and important, and Raven has done a lot of things and has stayed in the Disney family. She has an overall deal with Disney still. She's producing and directing. And so, yes, she has that legacy with them and has the impact. But when you look at the numbers and the money that Miley brought in, it doesn't compare. So to me, it makes sense that Miley is the one that got that recognition first. I think there's probably Selena Gomez. I would expect to be the next one because again, she's on Hulu with Only
Hmm.
Murders, and she's producing the new Wizards reboot, so she's stayed within that as well. Um, but I think Miley very deservedly the first Disney Channel star to get that.
And there's one more. I said I had two more questions on it. That you reminded me of like five others, but I used to where I used to work. I would work with people that um, worked at arenas because like in my previous job we would put on like state championship events. Um, and I was working when the what was the two worlds collide, or what was the
Best of both worlds.
best of both worlds, that's it.
Uh-huh.
And I had that show. I was working in Austin, Texas. That show had come through Austin, Texas, and they booked it for I don't know, like 2 or 3 nights, or maybe even more. And they were selling out every show. And I had heard that, they there was like some type of either loophole or just something in the contract where um they basically could book it was like a booking fee for two people because there was Miley Cyrus, but then there was also Hannah Montana.
Wow.
Did you hear did you see
No,
anything about that
I
or
didn't go
okay.
into too much about the touring, other than the ticketing fiasco and like the mayhem that led to. But that's so interesting.
Well, and that's I don't, that's one of those things that when I heard it, I'm like, is that I don't know, like is that something that really happened
I don't know how
or
that would work because you're like the contracts, you're still there's not a contract for Hannah Montana. So I don't
yeah.
know how they would pay out to a second individual unless they really did something a little bit shady in that regard. But I don't know.
It was one of those really interesting stories that I wasn't really sure if it
I'd
it
be
was
curious. Yeah,
true
that's
or
definitely
not.
something to look into. Yeah.
Um, so before we get to the rapid questions for real now, um, is there anything else you're working on? Do you have another big project coming up? I know you do a lot of interviews and you're writing for other outlets, but are there more projects such as this that you're working on right now?
Very early stages of ideas. I'd love to do another book. I'm right now just working back on articles and things, kind of giving myself a break. But I would definitely love to do another book and just figuring out what that might look like.
Okay. So these rapid questions, the way that I do these, I ask the question, you can give an answer and that's it. You don't have to explain anything, or you can explain a little bit if you want. And some of them are about parks, and then some of them are specific to the book. So, are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. The
Nervous but
first
ready.
one, the first one, do you have a favorite Disney park?
I think Epcot. Um, I was just there this weekend actually, and I love Epcot in general as an adult. Going like without kids, it's the more adult friendly, chill park. Good food, good drinks, like the festivals. But it also has to me the greatest ride at Walt Disney World, which is Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. So I love that ride with my whole heart, and that wins Epcot the top spot.
I have not been on that one yet. The Epcot is Epcot is the park that every time it's not like I don't like it going into a vacation, but when I leave, I think, man, Epcot is so much cooler than I gave it credit for coming in. Like it doesn't matter if I'm expecting like something amazing. I leave that park and I'm like, this was a really fun park.
Yeah,
Like you just
yeah.
experienced so
It's
much there.
vibes. It's very
Yeah.
vibes. It's not um but I will say I went to Disneyland for the first time last year. Growing up in Orlando, it was just always Disney World, so I'd never been to Disneyland in California. And California Adventure Park, I also really, really loved. I loved the Incredicoaster. I thought it was a really fun park with great theming and worlds. And yeah, that would be my second.
We actually went for the first time last summer as well, and in particular, I love Disneyland. And it's a lot easier to get around Disneyland than it is Walt Disney
Yeah,
World. I had no
yeah,
idea, but I love the Disneyland park. But then in California Adventure, my boys are at the age where they're starting to get into Avengers. Avengers Campus was
yeah,
really really cool.
yeah.
Cars Land, I had heard
Yeah,
about since it opened and wanted to go. And it is just amazing. I hope that whatever ends up happening with this new Cars project
yeah.
in Magic Kingdom, I hope they're able to bring over some of the things they do in Cars Land, like around Halloween and Christmas,
Mm,
where the cars are like in costumes and everything. That was
yeah,
really, really fun.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
do you have a favorite Disney attraction or ride?
Well, Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. I also love Incredicoaster. Um, all of this is relatively new. I was terrified of the big rides, like roller coasters, until like the last couple of years, and now I've become a junkie. I love Tower of Terror now. Uh, the classics. I enjoy living with the land at
Hmm.
Epcot. Um, Thunder Mountain. Uh, Great one. I just did Space Mountain at Mickey's Not So Scary, where they have it like all the lights off, no twinkle
Oh,
lights, like
okay.
no space lights. And they played a soundtrack of, I don't know what it was, like instrumental, but also spooky music. And I thought
Hmm.
that elevated Space Mountain by 10, and they should keep that always. Because Space Mountain, it's old, it's a little janky. It's, fallen out of favor for me with some of the newer rides, but that theming overhaul, I think that would be great. Uh, yeah, those are probably my top.
I found out on our last trip to, or on our trip to Disneyland, that the Disneyland version of Space Mountain
Mm.
is so much smoother than the Walt Disney
Mm.
World version, because it came second. And when I was standing in line with my two kids for Space Mountain and Disneyland, I was talking to a cast member about that, and they said, yes, this one was built second. So like they kind of figured things out a little bit with the ride track, and they figured things out with the car. But they're like, but have you been on the Matterhorn? Because that's the
Yeah,
one that will like throw your back out if you're not prepared for
yeah,
it.
yeah, that's rough.
Last thing on the parks. When we go to the parks, we actually I don't do a lot of sit down restaurants and everything. I do a lot of like quick service, but I do a lot of snacks there. Do you have a favorite snack at any Disney park?
Um, well, I'm gonna go back to Epcot and go to Norway and the school bread. Have you had
Okay.
that?
No, I
It's like
haven't.
it's like a round pastry, but it's filled with cream and it has like cardamom and coconut, and it's
Okay.
delicious. I really love the school bread. Um, yeah, the margaritas in the little tequila cave at Epcot in Mexico, also great. Oh, I did not mean to give it a thumbs down. This is a thumbs up. Um, yeah, I love that. I'm not a big fan of like the pretzels, the churros, like turkey legs. I don't do that. Um, yeah. I found the pizza at the sit down Italy restaurant in Epcot is also really, really top tier pizza. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of the other parks, what sticks out. Uh, no, no, that's
Okay.
it.
All right. So on the book, was there was there a favorite thing, or it could be two or three, whatever, that you found out researching this book that you didn't know going into it?
Mm, I found out, I mean, so much. I think I thought I had an understanding of it, but obviously a lot of the small details and the reveals, that was all new to me. I think on a broader level, just understanding the animosity between the different Disney divisions, that was surprising. I think, we think of it as this machine, and it very much wasn't for a long time. Um, Probably that. There were other things like uh, who sang for Paolo in the Lizzie McGuire movie, and
Hmm.
the answer is really boring because it's just like a middle-aged music producer who recorded the demo track and then they put him in. Same with Jordan Cahill in this decom called Stuck in the Suburbs. The character was or the actor playing him was Taron Killam, and it was also just a music producer. They used his voice instead of Taron's. Um, Little fun nuggets like that. Yeah.
Well, in the you write, you spend actually a good amount of time writing about like Zac Efron and what
Yes.
happened to him, and how his voice is not in the first
Yes.
High School Musical, but he had the kind of cachet by the second music, or by the second movie, that
Yeah.
he was able to,
Yeah.
and I remember that story being kind of getting headlines when The Greatest Showman
Mm.
came
Hmm.
out,
Hmm.
and people asking that. There's actually Hugh Jackman actually says, he's kind of saying, yes, he sings all of his songs at The Greatest Showman, and here's how you can tell from like a theater background and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah,
Um,
Disney did not think that was going to become an issue because it hadn't been before. Like with the others that I mentioned, like Paolo and this other decom, like these things weren't blowing up. So these kids weren't doing interviews. No one looked into this or cared, frankly, who was singing until Zac Efron becomes a superstar. High School Musical is this massive, massive hit, and suddenly everyone's like, "Wait, that doesn't sound right. That's not him?" And he can't answer questions in interviews about singing, and he's put in this very awkward situation. And so then, yeah, they let him sing in two and three.
so then, what do you have, either from research in the book, either from growing up with Disney Channel? Do you have a favorite or top two or three Disney shows and or original movies?
I really love Lizzie McGuire. I loved that growing up, and I think it holds up really well to go back and watch now. Um, I think DComs, I Johnny Tsunami is a great
Okay.
one. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend Johnny Tsunami and Xenon Girl of the 21st Century. Those are really formative for me. Um, Also there's one called Smart House that was kind of like the early like AI robots in our homes warning. And then I mean, I was in college when High School Musical came out, but I think that film is just like perfection. I think the first one, especially because they didn't know what they had. There's just something magical about it. And it's just a wonderful movie from start to finish. And it's so clear that Zach is a star and everyone's giving their all and selling it. Yeah, I love High School Musical.
And correct me if I'm wrong, is that came before Glee, right? Was that sort of the
Yes,
precursor
yes,
to
all of them.
show
Mhm, exactly.
that
Yeah.
Glee could be successful?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, the really the last thing that it was something I forgot earlier when we were talking about Disney Channel shows, and that one, the 65 episode rule, that then got extended. Have you ever watched the show Bunked on Disney
Yeah,
Channel?
yes. It just
So
ended after
yeah, and
many years. Yeah.
that's the longest running show, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And my kids are really really into it now. So we had this we had this really long conversation about like I said, Bunked has been on for a long time because there's not, it's this ensemble cast. It's not somebody in the title. There's not somebody's name in the title.
Hmm.
It's not about one particular character. There was the character, I can't remember her name, but who ends up becoming like the owner of the
Counselor, or
ranch.
yeah. Hmm.
Like she was on it the whole time, and I think maybe one or two other people were on, but they were able to kind of introduce new people through that.
Right.
Do you think, just in general, like Disney and other companies, is that you think that's the new model for trying to appeal to younger audiences that you don't build a show around somebody who will become a megastar and then leave. You try to build around an ensemble of then those people can go and they can do various projects and you can bring new people in.
And maybe I think it's interesting because the reason a lot of the times that these shows end, often yes, it is that the star grows up and is ready to move on and break out of that, but it's also because it doesn't work for the stories. So you've got a 25-year-old doesn't really fit in a
Hmm.
middle school storyline. So from a storytelling perspective, it's really smart if you want to continue a show to have it not rely on this one person who's inevitably going to grow up. Um, but I don't know, and I'm curious about Bunked and how they've done it, because it also seems like it might get expensive. Like, so Disney also notoriously ends shows. Um, Oftentimes they would cancel the shows after 3 seasons, and retool it for the fourth season, to get around sort of these. They had these union. A lot of
Hmm.
the union bargaining agreements stipulated that after 3 seasons they had to raise the minimums, and so everyone's fees went up and it cost more to make the show. So I'm curious in that long running show, and it might have changed now the way that they do that. Um, but I guess also if you're turning over the cast, your cast, you're not getting these star fees that you're having to pay.
Yeah.
Um, Everyone's new coming in. But yeah, you're right. But you're also not, I don't think anyone from Bunked has necessarily become a household name outside of those shows, unless you're a fan of that show, you know those people. But you're not really creating I'd be curious what if Bunked is if the merch and things like that, if they're able to
Hmm.
monopolize that in a way without having these sort of beloved faces that carry on through the show. No, but it's interesting to think about.
Yeah. Well, Ashley, this was awesome to do this. Like I said, I've been asked to talk about the Disney Channel for a long time. I did not grow up with the Disney Channel, so I wanted to find the right person to be able to educate me on everything that happened. You were the perfect person to be able to do that and walk through some of this. So thank you very, very much. How can people get the book? How can people follow what you're doing with this, future projects, and other things?
Yeah, you can get the book wherever books are sold, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Audible, um, anywhere it's available in hardcover, ebook, and audiobook format. Or at your local library, they should have it as well in all of those formats. And then you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at Amspen, AMSPEN, or pretty much any of the other socials, but most active probably on Instagram. Yeah, I hope everyone checks it out.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ashley, for doing this, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me. You too.